Hello again, and thank you for joining with me today. And I hope that you're benefiting from this continuing conversation about the issues of loneliness and relationships and the church and all the rest of that kind of stuff. One of the things that I emphasized at length yesterday was that the whole idea of church is to be this community where people come together. Our church is a large church, and so that makes it difficult for people to kind of get to know people and find their way around. And yet that's one of the reasons why we serve breakfast every Sunday morning, not because people are even hungry, but we try to create these places where people can break down into smaller groups and begin to interact. I find that some of our best fellowship is across a cup of coffee or across some food at the table. But this idea that somehow we're doing parts of our life together with other people becomes an essential thing. That's why we break it down into smaller meeting groups of men and women and singles and so forth and so on throughout the week, so that people can gather in smaller groups and begin to develop more meaningful relationships. Because as I said previously, what we're facing in our country today is a epidemic of loneliness. It's worse than the pandemic, and it's proving to be even more deadly. But I was talking yesterday also about parenting, and I find that many husbands and wives may have been married for years, but they feel a tremendous depth of loneliness, and many marriages fall apart because of it. It's the idea that a man or a woman begins talking with somebody else at work, usually. That's the most common place. So they meet someone online and they begin to interact and share their feelings. And before long, they stop loving the person that they are supposed to love, and they start falling in love or deep like with someone else. And what really lies at the root of that is that people feel deeply lonely. And because couples oftentimes spend so much of their time together not talking, not interacting, but sitting in front of a television set. My wife and I we caught ourselves kind of sinking into this during the lockdown that was brought on this country by diabolical people. And it was like we just sitting there like, there's nobody out in the streets. We go on a walk and the streets are empty, and if you see your neighbors, they keep 100 feet away from you, and it was just it really got incredibly lonely. And I just remember how we just started saying, let's watch a movie. And that becomes kind of a habitual way of living life, especially in this part of the country where it gets dark and cold early, and icy and wet outside, and you just begin to hibernate. But it's the worst kind of hibernation because you're not really interacting in any meaningful way. My wife and I, we spend most of the spring and the summer outside on our deck, just sitting, talking, listening to music, and sometimes FaceTiming or talking on the phone with our kids or our grandkids, because we know that we need that interaction. We need that input. We want to know that somebody cares about us. And that was really what lay at the bottom of Paul's response to the Philippians. He says, I'm so warmed by your thoughtfulness that your concern for me blossomed once again, like flowers coming out in spring, and you showed that to me. And there's a tremendous need for that kind of thoughtfulness. I find that it's amazing when I remember somebody's name. I went up to one of our ushers on Sunday morning, and I saw her, and I thought, I know her name, and then I remembered her name, and I went up and I said hi, and I mentioned her name, and she kind of lit up. Oh, you remembered my name. And it's kind of a crazy thing. It's kind of embarrassing to admit that I would have to do that, but you might understand that I not only have a lot of names in my head, but I also am finding as I age, I have increasing trouble remembering them. Anyway, but I think that what we're overlooking is that we need to spend a quantity of time with people in order to have a quality of time with them. And I have found that our closest relationships, our closest friendships are people that we've been hanging out with for decades. And we've gone through marriage woes. We've gone through the challenges of raising kids. We've seen our kids grow up, go to school, get jobs. We've seen grandkids coming. We've gone through all these passages of life, and we can talk about these things and understand them. But one of the things that my wife and I recognized was happening as we are all growing older and our families are growing older with our own grandkids and some of us with great grandkids, we find that we're orienting more and more to that circle of family and friends, and we don't nearly have the opportunity to interact together with each other as we used to. And you realize that there's an important part of our life that is no longer being stimulated. The quantity of time is going down, and the opportunity to have quality interaction. You just have to have people in your life that you can tell the honest truth to, and people that you can weep with, as well as people that you can rejoice with. That when you go through bad times and you say, "Would you pray for me?" that you know that that's what they're going to do. You have no question in your mind. And you know that regardless of thick or thin, they're going to be there to help you get through that season of your life. It's a crazy dynamic that I see happening today. I get letters from people or emails from young people today saying, "I'm afraid to have kids. I don't want to start a family." And part of it, people saying, "Well, it takes so much time and so much energy, and I have my career, and besides, I have my pets." And this is a weird thing to me, is that where people are actually finding pets as a replacement for children. There's all sorts of problems with that, because maybe you like your pets because they never tell you what they think. Unless you got a dog who bites you every time you come around him, you don't really know how that animal feels about you. And that's the thing, is they're always excited to see you, especially dogs. Cats don't care. But basically, dogs are always excited to see them. That's why I love dogs. Dogs are always happy to see anybody. And they make you feel loved and valuable, if not licked and wet. But there's something vitally important in having relationships that aren't always easy. In fact, in Proverbs 27:17, it was Solomon who said, "As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another." That I may not like having to work through conflict with people. I may not enjoy going through that process, but it's the process of growth. It's the same reason why we would go and exercise and work out, is because when we face the strain and the tension, that actually stimulates blood flow. It stimulates health to the body. It causes our muscles to tone and stay healthier and not atrophy, because if you don't do them, they atrophy. And that's the whole point, is that we sometimes begin to atrophy as people because our minds aren't being stimulated by conversation. They're not being stimulated by challenges. I would love to say it. I appreciate it when my wife or a friend says to me, "I see you doing X, Y, Z, and I think you need to really address that in your life." I never appreciate that. I may say to them, "Well, thank you for saying that," but in my heart I'm saying, "Ouch, that hurts. I want you to pretend like there's no problem here." But the simple fact is that none of us change without other people telling us we need to. And that's the long and the short of it. I think that one of the major purposes of marriage is to make us grow as people, and especially make us grow spiritually. When I first started teaching on marriage, one of the things that struck me as I was reading the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus said, "Pray for our enemies and love your enemies and pray for those who despitefully use you." And I thought, if I treated my wife the way the Bible says I should treat my enemies, my marriage would improve 100% overnight. Because if I just simply committed, I'm going to love my wife regardless of whether she's having a good day or a bad day, whether she slept or didn't sleep. She's sick or healthy. I'm going to love her. If I commit to doing that, then it would be a lot better all the time. And even when you feel like somebody says something that hurts your feeling, and you say, "Well, I'm going to pray for them that God would give them grace." There's something healing and restorative in that. And essentially, it makes us better and more wholesome people. And that's why I think that one of the things that Paul went on to say in verse 11, where he said, "I am not saying this because I am in need, for I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances is." The interesting, that word content is a Latin word. It's taken from the Latin, which really means from the Greek, which means to be self-sufficient. In other words, Paul said, I'm not going into this relationship because of needs that I have that I'm trying to fill. I'm going into this relationship because my needs have been sufficiently met through Christ, and now I want to pour myself into you. That's why I find that healthy marriages are ones that both people are committed to giving themselves 100% to the welfare and the good of the other one. It has a sacrificial dynamic to it. And I think that we need to understand that the way that we have friends and develop those kind of intimacies is by somebody who engages with other people. So I even encourage elderly people who are maybe retired and their family isn't around them to find some place where they can get engaged, find some place where they can begin to have conversation and get to be known and to know other people. And they'll be a lot happier. Their mental state will be healthier. Well, again, out of time. Pick it up tomorrow if you don't mind. And again, I thank you for investing the most valuable thing you have, that is your time, and listening to a windbag like me bloviate. God bless you and go in His grace.